there are a lot of people in Congress who are quite concerned about this, about the use of military power to basically kill people who we think are criminals. May very well be, probably are, but the U.S. Navy is not a death squad, and it's profoundly illegitimate. We have the Congress, I think, is increasingly unhappy that we haven't seen what the legal justifications are, and they should be unhappy about that. And you're beginning to see a return to the issue of the necessity of a congressional authorization for the use of military force, which is a term of art in our system, an AUMF, for the use of force. One of the positive consequences, I hope, of the Trump administration eventually will be a realization that Congress really needs to reassert its authority, including over matters of war and peace.
Is there going to be a war in the Caribbean? Is the US going to start bombing Caracas? Like, how's this all playing out?
So, I mean, it's a interesting question. One argument that I've heard is that the Latin American policy is really controlled by Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, whereas unfortunately the European policy has been kind of handed over to a bunch of people, including Harvey Witkoff. And that Rubio is smart enough to know what the history of American interventions in Latin America have been over the long term. I do think, though, that they've stumbled into something where they don't particularly have a plan, and where you can easily imagine one damn thing leading to another, as often happens in international affairs. If Franz Ferdinand had decided to turn around that car in Sarajevo after the first assassination attempt, World War I, as we knew it, may very well not have occurred. And so things, one thing after another can happen. There is a very large issue, and I think actually there are a lot of people in Congress who are quite concerned about this, about the use of military power to basically kill people who we think are criminals. May very well be, probably are, but the U.S. Navy is not a death squad, and it's profoundly illegitimate. We have the Congress, I think, is increasingly unhappy that we haven't seen what the legal justifications are, and they should be unhappy about that. And you're beginning to see a return to the issue of the necessity of a congressional authorization for the use of military force, which is a term of art in our system, an AUMF, for the use of force. One of the positive consequences, I hope, of the Trump administration eventually will be a realization that Congress really needs to reassert its authority, including over matters of war and peace. I mean, Congress has been part of the reason why Trump can do the things he's done. And some of it has to do with the latent powers of the presidency. Some of it has to do with an abdication of responsibility by the United States Congress, including on issues of war and peace.
The national security strategy effectively says that the US should be dominant and secure within the Western Hemisphere. And obviously, Maduro is not in the US sphere. But I was hearing from a Brazilian naval officer last Friday here in London, just, the sort of, there are plenty in Brazil that find the Maduro regime really unpalatable, but there are many, many more who find it a real affront to see a US aircraft carrier parked on the north coast of their continent, and the threat of US hard power into sort of South American, Latin American affairs. And so there's this danger that rather than strengthening the position within their sphere of the Western Hemisphere, they actually drive, Brazil, Colombia, Chile, sort of to become more critical of the US.
All this stuff is counterproductive. I mean, no question about it. As always, as I said, there's this little kernel of something real. The kernel of something real that the national security strategy touches in this case is that we've tended to neglect the Western Hemisphere. When I was at the State Department, I came in from the outside as an academic for several years. The powerful regional bureaus were the European Bureau, the Near East Asia Bureau, sort of Middle East, and the East Asia and Pacific bureaus. Latin America and Africa, South and Central Asia, they were secondary. So there's that, and to some extent, what the administration is tapping is an old um, variant of American foreign policy, which is very much focused on the hemisphere, and that helps explain the Looney Tunes stuff about Greenland and Canada as well. But no question, it's counterproductive. Again, just to my caution always is look at some of the realities of what's going on. So Colombia has a pretty hard left government. I mean, it is run by a former terrorist. Um, Actually, collaboration on drug enforcement and so on continues at the same level that it always did. My understanding, my understanding is. So, you have to look at the surface things and you have to look at the subsurface things. The truth is, Latin America, by and large, has always had a very kind of jaundiced view of the United States for reasons that I fully understand. So I think they've chosen a dangerous course of action. Now, if tomorrow there's a coup that removes Maduro and the democratically elected uh, president somehow by some miracle replaces him, we may all step back and say, "Yeah, we didn't like the method, but the outcome is good." It just I find it somewhat unlikely that the methods that they're using will yield the result that they want. But it's conceivable that it might, although but I think it's unlikely.
Eliot Cohen, thank you very much indeed. It's been a really interesting conversation, and I hope you'll come back on Superpowers again in the future. You have been watching Superpowers, the future of global security, here on Times Radio. For more of Times Radio's brilliant geopolitical content, please make sure that you subscribe to the Times Radio channel. To finish the year, there's the year in review, where I joined the team from Frontline to talk through what has been an incredibly busy year in global geopolitics and security and defense. So please make sure you look out for that next week. But for now, I'm James Heapy. Thanks for watching and have a great Christmas.